Hello and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another quick fire deep dive. This time we're touching on a genre that hasn't really had much attention on the channel, but it is a genre I do like, and it is punk. We're talking about the Minutemen. Now, of course, they're an 80s punk band, and you've got to say they're not your typical punk rockers. They're not sort of scream and make as much noise as possible as a statement. It's not that I'm not trying to put punk down. I'm a fan of a lot of punk music, but they're different. They've got a lot of funk influence. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. They're a three-piece. George Hurley on drums, Mike Watt is there, and Dee Boon is the singer. And they have 5 albums, but I'm also including 2 EPs because they were longer than their first album. So I felt like I may as well count them. So let's get right into it. I'm excited to talk about them. My number 7 Minutemen album is an album, and it is The Politics of Time. Is it an album is another question. I'm counting it for this, but it is very much a sort of compilation of odds and ends. A lot of really poorly recorded live stuff, which is a bit shit to sit through. It's not their best material, I've got to say, but you do get some real nice gems in there as well. Namely, Working Men Are Pissed, which is like a minute long. This will be a trend, very short songs that are somehow excellent. And it is really memorable, really anthemic. That is definitely the highlight of the album. There are a couple other positive spots, but it's a bit of a slog, and I've got it as a 5 out of 10. My number 6 is one of the 2 EPs I'll be covering, and it is Project Mersh from 1985. I've actually got this as a 7, so this is good. I think it could have been even better if not for the more spiel thing. There's a song called Torspiel, which is like kind of cool. I actually really liked it my first time listening to it, and then you get like an extended, just repetitive thing of the hook being repeated over and over again with more spiel, which I didn't need. The rest of the album is pretty good, I think. It's kind of them openly going in a more sort of commercial direction. I think the Cheerleaders is a good song as well, and Torspiel, like I said, is good. Does it have any of their best material? No, but I think it's an interesting step towards what would be their final sort of piece of work, where they really take the ideas that they're running with post Double Nickels on the Dime. And I think Project Merch is an interesting step, and there are some really good songs on it, but it does feel a little bit insubstantial. So yeah, it's good, 7 out of 10, but not their best. My number 5 is going to be their debut album. I know they released a 6-minute EP before this, but I've got The Punchline, which is an album, even though it's 15 minutes long, and there are 18 tracks. So as you can imagine, a lot of these are under a minute. Love the album art, by the way, really cool. Apparently done by Dee Boon himself. This is another 7 for me. I think it's hard to rate an album like this higher than that, because I did really enjoy it. But aside from the first 2 tracks, Search and Tension, I don't think any of the other songs really have the time to leave an impact. It's not much bad here. It's just that everything blows by so quickly, even for their standards, that it's really hard to find something to hold on to. I think they would hone their craft a lot better with future efforts in terms of making those sort of shorter albums and songs. And this is an interesting step. I think it's a really cool place to start because it is so short and you can just chuck it on. And yeah, there are some great riffs, especially I think Search is just awesome for a song under a minute long. Really, really cool. Definitely check that one out if you haven't checked out the album, but you might as well just check the album out because it is a lot of fun, even if I can only give it a 7, because it's sort of one long piece. And yeah, it's very odd. It's hard to talk about, it's hard to rate, but I enjoyed it, and I would probably recommend it to people who are interested in checking out the band, because it is a really interesting snapshot of their very early beginnings. And then the top four, I think, is really the best stuff they did, as you would imagine with this kind of list. My number four is the second EP on the list, Buzz or Howl Under the Influence of Heat from 1983. This is an 8 out of 10. I think this is a really strong EP. I mean, the obvious highlight for me is I Felt Like a Gringo, but it has a lot of their sort of more well-regarded songs like Little Man with a Gun in His Hand and Cut. I think those are really great as well. There's a real sort of energy to this one that, you know, they have energy on all their albums, but I think this one, it's the most sort of palpable, and, you know, there is attention to a lot of this, which I really think works. The sort of the funk influence is bleeding in a lot more now compared to earlier. It's always there in the guitar playing, but yeah, it's definitely a lot more prominent now by this EP. Yeah, it's really strong. Songs are really anthemic, great bass lines, great guitar parts, as you'd expect. All three of them are incredible musicians. George Hurley's drums as well are terrific throughout the discography. Such a unique style, but so just varied and cool, and propelling these songs whilst also standing out as cool drum parts. So yeah, Buzz or Howl Under the Influence of Heat is great. Probably the one I would recommend to the to fans of like straight ahead punk. This is probably the one that you want to listen to, I would say. My number three is actually the one I heard first, which is their second album, What Makes a Man Start Fires. It's not quite the 15 minutes of their debut, but at 25 minutes, it's not very long either. They're sort of starting to flesh things out a little bit. It still has that feeling of the punchline where, you know, there are a few songs that kind of just pass you by without even noticing them. But this does have more songs that really leave an impact. Life as a Rehearsal being one of them. Fake Contest is really great as well. And I think the highlight of the album is The Anchor. Really great. Some great live performances of them playing it as well. Sell or Be Sold, also fantastic song. Yeah, this was a good starting point for me, I think, because I think this sort of encapsulates sort of what they were before this, and it sort of hints towards what is to come afterwards. Of course, the two albums left are ones that came after this one. So yeah, it's a pretty good starting point. But you probably should listen to the punchline first. But this sort of is them announcing themselves as a sort of mature sort of band forming themselves. Of course, Bob Dylan wrote propaganda songs. This is another really iconic Minutemen song, and it's interesting because watching the documentary on them, that it was actually a sort of loving tribute to Bob Dylan, and it's sort of like saying, well, Bob Dylan wrote propaganda songs, so can I. Whereas a lot of people took it as like, you know, a jab or a dig at Bob Dylan, which I think is quite interesting, because that's what I assumed it was based on the title. But yeah, it's a really cool album. Another great album cover, really minimalist. And yeah, definite recommendation on that one. And then my number two, you won't be surprised to see what's at number one. So that means my number two has to be Three-Way Tie for Last from 1985, their final album before D. Boon's tragic passing in a car wreck. 8 out of 10 for me on this one. This is sort of, yeah, taking what they were doing on Project Mersh and going even further with it. You know, their songs are longer than they've ever been. A lot of them are over 3 minutes. Crazy, I know. And I think it works out for them. They have some great moments here. They do a cover of Have You Ever Seen the Rain by Creedence Clearwater Revival, which is so awesome, with the D. Boon and Mike Watt singing together. It gives it sort of like this really cool punky energy, even though they are playing it pretty straight to the original. The vocals really do sell it. Big Stick is great. What Is It is really cool. But I think the best song on the album is the opening track, The Price of Paradise. So cool, unlike anything else they've done before. It's got such an atmosphere to it, and this sort of darkness, which I really, really like. And I wonder what they would have done had D. Boon lived longer and they would have made another album. alas, they did not. And also, Stories as well is a really good short one on that. Really good bit of songwriting there. And their songwriting had really matured by this point, and they were able to flesh out these songs into longer pieces, and it worked, just as well as their shorter ones. Which, of course, means my number one at a 9 out of 10 from 1984 is Double Nickels on the Dime. Perhaps the album they are mostly remembered by, for some people only remembered by. It is a crazy double album filled with pretty much every style that they wanted to do. There's some acoustic instrumental, there's some cool funky stuff, there's just lots of variety, lots of really memorable moments. It feels like the perfect road trip album. I feel like this influenced a lot of stuff I like later on, like Guided by Voices. I think definitely influenced by the Minutemen. And if you're influenced by the Minutemen, you're probably primarily influenced by Double Nickels on the Dime. And between History Lesson Part 2 and Corona and Vietnam and Do You Want New Wave or Do You Want the Truth, it has some of their most iconic songs ever. And then spotted in are some really underrated ones, like Cohesion, that just acoustic guitar instrumental from a punk band is so cool. And that's what I respect the most about them, I think, is that they were willing to just do whatever they felt like, and they weren't really bothered about how they were labeled or what is punk. They were just making music that they enjoyed. And I think that's the most beautiful thing you could ask for, really, in starting a band. So yeah, Double Nickels on the Dime is my easy winner. There's really not much to say about it beyond listen to it. It's got so many great tracks, and it's sprawling and just magnificent pretty much from start to finish. There's a few moments, but there are so many songs. There's like 43 songs or something. They're not all going to be great, but most of them are. Which leaves us with the top 10 songs. Going to blitz through these. Number 10 is Themselves from Double Nickels on the Dime. Number 9 is The Red and the Black from Three-Way Tie for Last. Number 8 is Do You Want New Wave or Do You Want the Truth from Double Nickels on the Dime. Number 7, My Heart in the Real World, also from Double Nickels on the Dime. Number 6, Maybe Partying Will Help, also from Double Nickels on the Dime. My number 5 is The Anchor from What Makes a Man Start Fires. Number 4 is Stories from Three-Way Tie for Last. Number 3, The Price of Paradise, also from Three-Way Tie for Last. Number 2 is Corona from Double Nickels on the Dime. And number 1, their autobiographical song, a true masterpiece. If you don't take anything else from this video, listen to History Lesson Part 2 from Double Nickels on the Dime. One of the great songs, I think. And there you have it. That is the Minutemen. So it's interesting. I don't think I can recommend starting with Double Nickels on the Dime, even though you have to listen to that really eventually because it is their magnum opus for sure. But I don't think it's the best starting point. I think I would start with the Punchline and then go into What Makes a Man Start Fires and then go to Double Nickels on the Dime. Unless you just really want some proper, just good punk music, I would go for the EP Buzz or Howl, Under the Influence of Heat. And then if you want something less punky, something a bit more sort of accessible to start you off and then go back, I would say Three-Way Tie for Last would be the best way to start. And it's just a great album anyway. You can't really go wrong with these apart from The Politics of Time. These are all good. And this is a great discography to go through. It was really fun to discover all this music. And yeah, let me know down below if you are into the Minutemen at all, what your favorite songs, albums, etc. are. And yeah, I would love to hear from you, and hopefully I'll catch you soon for another video.